Are you worried you're losing hair, but you're not quite sure if it's hair loss or some temporary shedding? Did you know you could lose up to 50% of the hairs on your head before it becomes clearly visible? Well, in this video, we're going to go through the very first signs of balding. The earlier you catch hair loss, the better. It's fairly easy to stop the balding process, but it's very hard to reverse it if it's already happened. So make sure you watch the whole video. Okay, so what's the very first sign of balding? The absolute earliest warning signal that something is wrong? Well, it's not actually that easy to answer. This is because the balding process will differ from one person to the next. To clarify, I'm talking only about confirmed androgenetic alopecia, aka pattern baldness. The variation you get even between people with this one condition is massive. With that caveat out the way, let's look at the most common early warning signs of balding. Unequal hair shaft diameter. So in a healthy scalp, the hair follicles tend to be of similar thickness. You can see a horizontal stain on a healthy scalp under magnification. The follicles are the reddish circles with the white bit in the middle. You see they are all more or less a similar diameter. Now the hallmark of balding is that the follicles start to miniaturize. They become slimmer, shorter, and fall out quicker with each successive hair cycle. But this does not happen at the same time for all the follicles. In other words, even in parts of the scalp that are actively balding, at any given point in time, you will get a mix of hairs. Some will be heavily miniaturized, nearly gone, others will be completely healthy. And between these two extremes, you'll have various degrees of miniaturization. The end result will be very considerable variation in hair shaft thickness. Compare this stain to the earlier one. The variation in thickness from one follicle to the next is dramatic. The scientific name for this is anisotrichosis. It's a Greek name that literally means unequal hairs. This is what anisotrichosis looks like under low magnification on the scalp. Though often you will need a visit to a doctor's office to determine this, in some cases the unequal hair shaft diameter will be visible to the naked eye. In recent years, we've also had various USB microscopes sold online as, quote, scalp microscopes. The construction quality tends to be on the lower side and the magnification nowhere near what is advertised, but for $40 to $50, these little gadgets will give you a close-up view of your hair shafts, and you wouldn't otherwise be able to get that without visiting the doctor. Increased hair shedding. We all normally lose around 100 hairs per day as part of the normal, healthy hair growth cycle. The hairs fall out that are older hairs that have stopped growing. Their shedding gives way to a new hair that will start its hair growth phase all over again. In certain types of hair loss, most notably telogen effluvium, the hair growth cycle is abruptly altered at the same time throughout the scalp. This leads to noticeable shedding. Androgenetic alopecia, on the other hand, may or may not present with increased shedding. In other words, some people who are balding will notice they are shedding hairs left and right, on the pillow, their comb, down the shower drain, everywhere. Others will see no increased shedding whatsoever. So while shedding can be a helpful indicator of balding, it is neither an unmistakable sign nor does its absence mean you are not losing any hair. Whether or not you shed will really depend on the speed and extent of your thinning. If the thinning is confined to one area, you probably won't notice differences. If it's extensive, on the other hand, it means you have a more diffuse pattern of hair loss, which can lead to shedding. And it's not just between people. Any one man can notice periods of visible shedding, followed by longer periods without shedding. So as much as I'd like to give you a definitive answer, whether or not you'll see shedding, it depends. Thinning temples or crown. So this is the telltale sign that will be visible to the naked eye. Baldness almost always starts either at the frontal area with the enlargement of the temples or at the back of the head, the so-called crown. Sometimes it starts at both areas simultaneously. But there is a big difference between the two areas, and it has to do with the speed of thinning. In the vertex, the thinning can be a very gradual, drawn-out process. It will usually be years or even decades before the crown turns completely bald. For this reason, it's generally easier to reverse hair loss in the crown. Thinning at the temples and the frontal region in general happens at a much faster pace. Often it's so fast that you might not even notice it unless you're specifically looking out for it in the mirror every day. Women also recede at the temples, but unlike men, men, their recession is a far more gradual process. It's kind of similar how men bald in the vertex. So paradoxically, though less common, it's far easier to observe hair that's lifeless and difficult to style. Another early sign of AGA is that your hair will start to lose its volume and you will have more difficult time styling it. The two driving factors behind this are A, you have less hairs actively growing at any one time, and B, the hairs that are growing will tend to have a lower diameter. In other words, they won't be quite as thick. People often don't realize how important the hair shaft thickness is for overall volume. But actually, the volume of each hair shaft is proportional to the square of its radius. So if the average thickness of your hair shaft drops by half, the volume of your hair will drop 4 times. The end result of this is the hair is actually lifeless and increasingly difficult to style. As a takeaway, here are some useful questions to ask yourself if you suspect you are thinning. Have I started noticing more hairs on my pillow or in the shower? Do I see noticeable thinning in some parts of my scalp? Even worse, is the thinning generalized all over the top of my head? Looking at older photos, does my current hairline seem noticeably receded? Does pattern hair loss run in my family? The more of these questions you answer with a yes, the more likely it is that you have the early stages of baldness. On a more positive note, even if you answer yes to some of these questions, you can consider yourself lucky, because unlike most men, you have identified the problem at its earliest stages and you are in a prime position to stop it and even reverse it. Because the first law of baldness is this: the earlier you start treatment, the better off you'll be in the long term. And it's not even close. Okay guys, so if you're worried about hair loss, head over to hairguard.com. We have a range of products specifically for those with early hair loss and protecting yourself from further hair loss, hence Hair Guard. We guard your hair. Also, make sure you watch Alex's 90-day hair growth challenge video, which is in the description. Okay, so that's it for this video. Let me know if you want me to cover a topic next. If you've got a question, leave it below and I'll make sure to answer it. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
More hair, naturally. Hair Guard.